Our learners complete something like 500 million exercises every day, every single day. And so this means we have an enormous data set at our disposal for creating these personalization systems. App engagement is something that we think a lot about and spend a lot of time and effort on. And I think like gamification is kind of the secret sauce for how we achieve this. We ran a study last year that showed that learners that complete the beginning level part of our Spanish and French courses for English speakers got learners to the same achievement levels as students who had completed 4 semesters of college education in the United States.
Hello, and welcome to the Teens and AI podcast, where we interview leading figures in the world of AI from the perspective of young people. My name is Kate, and I'm your host for today's episode, where we're talking to Erin Gustafson, who is a lead data scientist at Duolingo. We discuss the rapid expansion of what started as a small tech startup, how central AI and gamification are to keeping learners engaged, and the future of linguistics. We hope you enjoy. Erin, hi, it's really nice to have you with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I thought we could just start off by you telling us a little bit about you, your role at Duolingo and how you ended up there, but also what Duolingo is for anyone who doesn't know what it is and what it does.
Sure. So Duolingo, to start, is a language learning platform. We have apps for mobile devices, and we have a website as well for learning languages. And we have somewhere north of 90 different courses that are all offered for free. So the mission at Duolingo is to develop the best education in the world and make it universally available. So one of the main ways that we do that is through offering a free product. I've been at Duolingo for almost 4 years as a data scientist. And I joined as the first data scientist at the company when we were, I think I was employee like 76 or something like that. And now we are probably 376. So seen a lot of growth in the company in the last 4 years, and growth in the data science function and team as well. Prior to coming to Duolingo, I was doing a PhD in linguistics. So I was at Northwestern University, and just to kind of give you a sense for how I ended up deciding to leave that academic environment and come to industry, I realized about halfway through my program that the academic life was not for me. I didn't want to sort of pursue that job trajectory for myself. And I reflected a lot on what I would want to do. And what I really loved about the work that I was doing for my PhD was the data. So I was in a program that was really quantitative focused, and we were running a lot of experiments to learn about language processing, and I focused on bilingualism for my research. So the quantitative aspects of my PhD was really what I loved the most. And data science was starting to emerge as this opportunity for people like me that have these quantitative skills, but don't necessarily want to stay in the academic environment. So I did an internship at the Northwestern Medical School doing some ML and NLP work with data from the electronic health record. And then after I finished my PhD, I hung out there for 6 months in a postdoc before I saw the job opening at Duolingo. And as soon as I saw that opening, I jumped on it because, my background in linguistics and bilingualism and doing data science at a company with a mission that I could get really excited about was kind of a dream come true. So that's how I ended up here. And it's 4 years later, and it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's really amazing how people do come to data science from so many different angles. It's not just about necessarily starting from a position of studying computer science. There are so many other things that you can bring to it, depending on what your previous experience is.
Absolutely.
And as you were saying, kind of Duolingo has grown really rapidly. And I think today it has approximately 500 million users. So it's huge today from where it was when it was a tech startup and when it launched in about 2012. So what do you think has enabled it to grow so successfully?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think something that's so cool about Duolingo is we've grown sort of organically. We didn't actually have a marketing team until a couple of years ago. And up until that point, we were just growing through word of mouth. And so really what we were focused on is building a really great product that people love to use and then love to talk about. And all of our growth we attributed just to that, of people saying, how much they loved learning with Duolingo. And now we're supplementing that with marketing, but a lot of our growth just kind of came naturally from a strong product.
It's estimated that 2 billion people worldwide are learning a language at any one time, according to the International Association of Language Centers. So it definitely tapped into something that a huge number of people are really passionate about. And I know that the use of AI within Duolingo has been going on since the very beginning. So it was a pretty early adopter of using this kind of technology within the educational sphere. And it enables a user to have an incredibly personalized experience. Yeah. So I was wondering whether you could tell us a little bit more about this and perhaps give some examples of where AI is being used in the app.
We really see technology as a force for good, and consider the data that we collect from our learners as an important tool for improving our product and getting it into the hands of the people that really need it. AI is an increasingly important part of our strategy. Like you said, it was an early part of our strategy, but more and more we're investing in it. And we really see it as a way to scale high quality education and still be able to offer it for free. And I think you called it out that personalization is really like the area that AI can contribute to the most. And the way that we tend to think about it is that the personalization that we provide gives you education that you would otherwise only be able to get from a really expensive one-on-one tutor. So we kind of are seeing it as like a great equalizer, that if we can give this free personalized education, like you don't need to pay for a one-on-one tutor to teach you the language. And something else that I think is pretty cool that I like to call out is that our learners complete something like 500 million exercises every day, every single day. And so this means we have an enormous data set at our disposal for creating these personalization systems. Some of the earliest uses of AI in our product were for personalization. So a couple of systems that I'll call out. One is the placement test. So this is something that's still in our product today, where when you start learning a language on Duolingo, there's basically a fork at the beginning where we ask you to either start from scratch at the very beginning of the course or take a placement test to kind of zoom you through some of the content so that you can start more at the level that's appropriate for you. So the placement test is AI driven. It's an adaptive test, and it helps sort of place you into the course at the appropriate level. Another sort of early AI product that we had was something that we call internally the word strength model. It's a spaced repetition model that basically helps us give clues in the product for learners to go back and study and practice old material that they've already learned. Spaced repetition is a really important part of learning science. And so AI helps us sort of build that into the product. Another early bet for us in the AI domain that I wanted to talk about was the Duolingo English test, which is a separate product, but it's the first digital first high stakes admission test that uses AI end to end. So AI is in the loop for the development of test items, administering the adaptive test, scoring the responses that we collect, and monitoring the test as well for security purposes. So we're really proud of the service that we're able to offer with the Duolingo English test, which is more accessible than other tests because it can actually be taken at home with a webcam versus traveling to a test center, which is common for like the TOEFL, for example. On top of that, it's a fraction of the price of competitor tests, and AI is a big part of what makes that possible.
So when might people take this test for people who don't know about the TOEFL?
Yeah, so the primary sort of use case for the Duolingo English test right now is for university admissions. And so we have a growing number of universities in the United States and elsewhere that accept the DET as equivalent to the TOEFL. So it's an alternative test for folks to take if either the TOEFL is not practical from a logistical standpoint to get to a test center, or it's just too expensive.
I think it's really interesting as well what you were saying about AI and forcing you to do repetition. I remember when I was learning languages on like flashcards, physical flashcards, you just kind of go, yeah, I kind of know that one, and you kind of flip it over and shift it to the side, and you know that you don't really know it. Whereas the benefit of having AI do that for you is it really can tell you don't know this one, and you do need to see it again. And I'm sure language teachers across the world could have endless conversations about the best ways to teach a language. There are so many different techniques and opinions on what you should teach first, which grammar concept you should introduce when. But at Duolingo, you have enough data, as you were saying, to really figure out what works best on a huge scale. So beyond the app that an individual user might see on a daily basis, Duolingo also has this huge research arm. So how has that been developed, and what does that look into?
We contribute to a lot of different research fields, and we're out there in the academic world presenting at conferences and publishing papers. And I think the thing that we really focus on, we are a company first. And so the work that we contribute to the scientific community is really focused on the problems that we're trying to solve for our learners to make the product better. So we do leverage a lot of like cutting edge research that other people are doing, at universities or at other companies. And then we try to, push that forward to either fit, our specific use case or to, push the bleeding edge even further away. And I think one area that we're really pushing things forward right now is our current lesson personalization system that we call BirdBrain. It's a student model where basically we take in those like 500 million exercises that learners complete every day, and we use it to train a system that tries to predict for each learner the likelihood of them getting each exercise correct or not. And then what that allows us to do is when we're designing a lesson for a particular learner, we can look at that data that we have and pick something or pick the exercises that will optimize the difficulty of the lesson. So it makes it so that we can design a lesson that's like not too easy that the learner is going to be like, well, this isn't working, I'm just going to quit, and not too hard that they're going to say, oh, this is too hard, I've lost motivation and I'm going to quit. So we're trying to find that like Goldilocks spot where you're going to learn as much as you can without it being demotivating. And right now that system is powering something like at least 40% of our lessons are personalized using this system. So this is an area where we're trying to push the bleeding edge forward and get this work out into the research community to get feedback and to have other people push even further on it.
And the US State Department estimates it can take 600 to more than 1,100 class hours to learn a language. And Duolingo kind of breaks this effort down into much smaller sessions that you can do anytime, anywhere. And the app functions in levels, right? So you gain points and trophies as you go along. So what do you think it is about the gamification of this style of education that's so effective to people? What keeps them coming back?
Yeah, so app engagement is something that we think a lot about and spend a lot of time and effort on. And I think like gamification is kind of the secret sauce for how we achieve this. Ultimately, we are a learning product, and our end goal is to be an effective tool for learning a language. But anyone who's learned a language knows how effortful it is. And you just, kind of said like how many hours it takes. It's just like a huge endeavor to learn a language. And for a product like ours, people choose to use it. And when you don't have the pressure of like the final grade in your course in school to keep you motivated, it's actually really easy for people to like just get demotivated and drop off without any consequences. So gamification is kind of how we try to tackle this. And we have a few core mechanics that have worked really well for us to help learners build habits. And I think that's kind of the bit that we focus on is habit building. And helping learners stay motivated so that they come back frequently to study the language that they've chosen. And I think that the streak is one of our most effective gamification mechanics, and it's been around for a long time. So what we do is we keep a running count of the number of consecutive days that you've completed at least one lesson on Duolingo. And this mechanic is kind of cool. Like it triggers loss aversion. So people get really attached to that number and they don't want to lose it. And so they'll study just for that reason alone. And so it gives them a little like motivational boost that they need to keep going and keep motivated. And I'm generally like a huge advocate for educational products, like taking cues from games for keeping learners engaged. And if you think about it, like learning through play is really common in classroom settings, especially like, for younger students. And I think that's something that ed tech products can really leverage as well to kind of keep people motivated.
And how might that technology and that approach, the approach of Duolingo, be used in other educational fields moving forward? To what extent really can an app replace a teacher, because it's certainly an incredible tool for enabling and increasing access to education, as you said. And in many ways, Duolingo actually uses AI to embrace some of the best parts of a good teacher's personality, and it engages specifically with the student. It's incredibly flexible to your needs and your time schedule, but you can't chat to it in your chosen language. You don't form a connection with it, though maybe some Duolingo users with a really long streak would disagree with me. But many people would say that the power of a good teacher is irreplaceable. So yeah, as tech develops to provide better education, how might this change the system as we know it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And one thing I do want to call out is we are not hoping to replace teachers. Classroom experiences are still really important. And, for people that have that available, we don't want to replace that. We want to supplement. Already in the US, we have a lot of school classrooms, like K through 12 classrooms, that are using Duolingo as a supplement to the, like the Spanish curriculum that is already in use in the classroom. And so we do have a platform for schools where teachers can go in and assign lessons on Duolingo for their students to use. For our particular EdTech product, we are a great primary source for people that don't have access to classroom education, and a great supplement for the people that do. And it's a great way for kids, adults alike, to study on their own time, but still benefit from that classroom experience whenever they can. And I think a big reason, especially for language learning, that the classroom experience is important is that language is a social thing. It is all about connecting with people and talking with them. And right now, that's hard to do with Duolingo. It's very much Duolingo as it is right now is a very individual experience. And, we have a team dedicated to building more social experiences within the app. But right now, you get more of that in the classroom than you do on an app like ours. But, again, that is something that we're starting to explore more. And it's a place, too, where we could bring teachers in to be part of our product as well.
Users of Duolingo across the world kind of doubled in March last year, almost as if though we couldn't travel, everyone wanted to still be able to connect with other countries and cultures. I know that in the week just after lockdown in the UK, we had a 296% increase in learners. And just after the World Health Organization announced the pandemic, 30 million people joined Duolingo, which is more than any previous New Year resolution spike ever.
Yes. I feel like we woke up one day and all of our metrics had skyrocketed. It was kind of crazy to see, some of your hypotheses about why people were using Duolingo more, that, we want to stay connected to other languages. And maybe there were sort of aspirational, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to be able to travel this year, but if I study up French while I'm in lockdown, maybe next year I can go on a trip to Paris. I think we had a lot of that. We have different people that are using Duolingo for different reasons. So there are people that are using it because, for example, learning English will give them a huge economic advantage, and English classes are expensive. We're free. And so we are a way that people can learn the skills that they need to get a better job. But then we have people, primarily in the United States, that maybe don't need to learn a language to open up their job prospects, but they want to have an activity on their phone that is productive versus, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram or playing Candy Crush or something like that. So we provide a way to, do something fun that is, exercising your brain and giving you new skills.
And one of the things that really helps people to stay is the deep learning frameworks that Duolingo is using to personalize the lessons, as we said. And in order to make those frameworks as effective as they are, huge amounts of data, of course, are collected and recorded. So how do you ensure people are comfortable with this, and how do you protect their data? And I think, how do we do this on a wider basis as these frameworks become more and more present in so many different areas of our lives?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and it's something that we spend a lot of time discussing and thinking about. We really value the privacy of our learners, and we take a lot of care to build systems, with AI systems in particular, with ethics in mind. So I think a couple of things that I'll call out here. One is we're really careful about the information that we collect from our learners. So we don't ask for very much, if any, sensitive information. I think the most we ask for is age, and that's for compliance with regulations in the United States and other countries, to make sure that we're protecting our younger learners. And beyond that, we really don't collect very much information. What we do collect, though, we're really thoughtful about how we use it. So when we're, for example, like building a predictive model, we think really carefully about the variables that we choose to include in that model to mitigate the bias and potential injustice that could come from the predictions that our models make. And so we're really careful about including variables that may be proxies for socioeconomic status or race. In cases too, where including those variables may actually make our models better, we're willing to make those trade-offs so that we can be as unbiased as we possibly can be with the systems that we're building. And one area too that this is especially important is for the Duolingo English test. As a high stakes test that uses AI throughout, we're really careful about how AI is used. We do still have humans in the loop for many, if not all, of the steps in that system.
And I think it's really interesting. It's the concept that, your algorithm is only as good as the data you put into it, but actually choosing the data that you put in to create an algorithm that's not biased and one that is inclusive, but also makes other people and the people using it feel safe. You're balancing a lot of different things, but I think it's really important that we talk about it.
Yeah.
And do you think that it's something that other apps are facing a lot as well as they do become more and more personalized?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm seeing a growing focus on ethical AI, sort of just out there in the world. And I'm really happy to see that. I was at a conference right before the pandemic started that had a panel like discussing these issues. And it was really encouraging to see that the interest in thinking about and tackling these issues, because as we have more and more data and more AI powered systems out there in the world, it's really easy to just assume that, I think there's this narrative that people have that human beings tend to be biased. And so let's just have AI make decisions and do the things that humans were doing because it's math and it can't be biased, right? But it can be. It absolutely can be, because the data that we're feeding it is biased in a lot of ways. And the decisions that we make about the systems to build encode a lot of that bias because humans are making those decisions as well. And so I think there's no easy solution to those problems, but it's important to be thinking about them. And it's something that I'm always keeping in mind when we're building models. Are there decisions that we're making that could lead to some sort of injustice for the learners that we're serving?
I think you've touched on something really fascinating in that we don't have to build AI which is in the image of humans, that we don't have to build something that looks like us and acts like us just to make our lives easier. It can do the jobs that we can't do. It can do things faster. It's actually, no, it can do things better and less affected and less biased than how we act. I think that's a really, really interesting concept to think about and to prioritize as well. And I know that the week before Article 50 was triggered in the UK, and we began the official process of leaving the EU, new learners in the UK increased by 24%. And when K-pop band BTS, when they toured the UK, there was a 50% increase, I read, in people learning Korean. And when the Tokyo Olympics should have been on, Japanese was popular. So I think, the pandemic and these kind of events really shine a light on our desire and our need to connect with others, and actually our willingness to understand other people's cultures. So what do you think is the future of language in this way? Because I know that translation technology is also adapting and developing rapidly. So do you think we will reach a point where we don't actually have to learn other languages? Or do you think the benefits of being multilingual are irreplaceable? And by the looks of these stats, still really, really important to people?
Yeah, it's a good question, and something that we do talk about as a company. I think our perspective is that even with the advancement of translation technologies, there still is going to be a desire for people to learn languages, and I think it's because of that human connection component. Part of the reason that people travel is to experience the culture of the place that they're traveling to, and part of that is speaking with the people that live there. And there's just something that I don't think we can ever replace that, like that discomfort, the awesome discomfort of like trying to order coffee in another language that you're not comfortable with. Like that's why people travel, and doing that instead with like your iPhone with Google Translate, translating for you instead. Like it's not the same. And I'm not super worried that we're going to be, replaced by technology in that way. I think people are always going to want that real human connection.
And how many languages do you speak?
So I studied French in college. It was my minor, so I really loved learning French and then going to France and having those awkward experiences trying to use it. That's the primary language that I study on Duolingo today as well. I've studied a bunch of other languages, but I wouldn't say that I'm bilingual or fluent in any of them. But I've studied Spanish, I've studied Italian, Swedish, Japanese for a while when I was planning a trip to Japan last year, Chinese, Mandarin specifically.
And having started and had a go at so many different languages, what are your tips for someone trying to learn a new language or starting a new language on Duolingo?
Yeah, it depends on what you're in for. So I find Romance languages very easy to learn at this point. I studied Spanish in high school, and then French, I think, came really easily to me because the languages are so similar. And then same with Italian. Like I went to Italy for a couple of months before I started grad school, and Italian came just very quickly because of that foundation. So that's one thing to consider if you want to pick up a new language. Do you want it to be as easy as possible? Pick something that's similar to what you've already learned. I studied Swedish. Oh, I forgot German. I studied German at one point too. I studied Swedish because that's my heritage. My family is originally from Sweden, and so I thought it would be fun to learn a language and kind of connect with that heritage. That's another kind of motivator. Travel is the other motivator for me. So I studied Japanese, like I said, because I had a trip to Tokyo planned for last spring. You know, with a product like Duolingo, you can dabble too. You can always pick something up, try it out for a week, decide, you know what, this isn't for me, and try something else. And it just kind of depends on what you're doing it for.
No, I really think if I ever needed to order coffee in pretty much any country, I think you could help me out.
Yes, got you covered.
You a text. And so my other question is sign language Duolingoable? I don't think that's a word, but we're going to it.
I like it. That's a really good question. And there are some people who work here now who are really passionate about adding ASL in particular. And we do a company-wide hackathon every year. So we take a week where we kind of put our normal work aside and pick some pet projects to hack together. And last year, some people worked on a prototype for American Sign Language or ASL. So I think it's possible. We're not there yet, but it's definitely something that people are thinking about. And I think it's important to consider that not all languages are spoken, and we should work towards incorporating those as well.
So what do you see for the future of EdTech, but also Duolingo kind of over the next 5-10 years? What do you hope for it, and what do you think is coming next?
Great question. So
you can take a minute, it's fine.
So, in the immediate term, we're really focusing on rounding out the learning experience on our product and making sure, like we were talking about before, a big part of language learning and using language is social. So that's one area that we're exploring both in app and outside of app. So we have Duolingo Events is this program that we have where it used to be in-person events. Now it's all virtual, but basically you can sign up to get in a room with other people learning your language, and there's a moderator, and you practice using whatever language you're learning. And the moderators build really cool experiences where, it could just be like a standard conversation, but it could also be cooking. You're learning to cook some like traditional Mexican dish, and you're speaking Spanish while you're doing it. So more experiences like that are something that we're thinking a lot about. And kind of what goes in hand with that too is, I think, focusing on speaking. Right now, a lot of the ways that you use Duolingo are like it's translation based, and you don't have to do a lot of speaking. In fact, you can skip every opportunity to speak in the app if you'd like to. So we're working on building more experiences that are really targeting speaking, like audio lessons that teach you short phrases and how to pronounce them correctly. We have something called repertoire skills that we just rolled out that teach you kind of real world phrases and real world situations and all the phrases that you need in order to do things like order coffee, like we've been talking about, or get a room at a hotel. So very like practical situations that really get you speaking. So I'm really excited about all of the ways that the product is going to build a more like holistic learning experience that can actually get people to that point of being able to go and speak a language out there in the real world. Beyond that, one other area that I'm really excited about, that something that we launched last year, is Duolingo ABC, which is a literacy app. So right now it's geared towards kids that are learning to read English as a starting point. And it's been really amazing to see how quickly that product has come together and how quickly the adoption has caught on. So it's already a really popular option for teaching reading. And so I'm really excited to see us expand that to other languages. And it's a sort of a project that's really close to our CEO's heart. There are a surprising number of adults that are illiterate in the world. And so we see this as like the next contribution that we can make, is to help tackle that literacy problem. We're starting with English, but the plan, I think, will be to expand that to other languages in the future as well.
Literacy just opens so many doors.
It does.
So harnessing the technology that you already have in order to enable that is so exciting, as well as the fact that I would love to go and cook with someone in another language, like learn a language and I make food at the same time. This sounds like the best combination of things ever. And of course, you did your PhD in linguistics, but then you also moved across into computer science, and you are, of course, a woman working in STEM, which is still, unfortunately, a rarity. So what has your experience of that been like, and what advice would you give to those who are interested in careers in tech and in STEM?
I have one sort of experience that I wanted to share from at the end of my first year of my PhD. So I spent my first year in particular paralyzed by imposter syndrome. So I felt like my peers knew more than I did. And I had that classic imposter syndrome fear that everybody would find out I was a fraud and that I didn't belong. And so I think one of the consequences of that is, in my first year, I was really quiet in class. I was afraid to participate in discussions or ask questions when I didn't understand, because I didn't want to expose that I didn't know anything. Not that I didn't know anything. I was just so insecure that I was afraid to even ask questions. At the end of the year, one of my professors, who was the grad student advisor, gave me kind of a standard end of first year evaluation. And the letter basically said that, like, through the written work that she had seen from me throughout the year, that I had a lot of ideas, and that she had noticed that I wasn't speaking up in class or in lab meetings. And so she really encouraged me to have the confidence to participate in these discussions. And that encouragement really helped me gain confidence and felt like I did, in fact, belong. And it was a pivot point for me in my PhD program. And I think, kind of zooming out, the moral for that for me is that it's important for women to find positive female role models. So seeing smart and powerful women lead my department in my PhD, and then getting candid and constructive feedback from them, really has made all the difference in my career and also just in my life. So I carry that forward into my job now, where actually the environment is pretty different. So, tech is generally male dominated, and Duolingo works really hard to keep diversity in mind. And we are closing that gap for our company in particular. But I'm still often one of the only or one of the few women in the room for meetings. But I think because of my experiences in grad school and that encouragement that I got from that female role model, I am not afraid to share. I know that my voice is important, and that I have ideas worth sharing. So I just kind of have to put the fear aside and just speak up. And something else that I wanted to call out too is, like, despite all of the personal growth that I've had over my career and through grad school, imposter syndrome is still very real for me and something that I struggle with. And I bring it up because something that has brought me a lot of comfort over the years is knowing that other people feel that way too. And early in grad school, imposter syndrome made me feel really isolated from everybody else, because I assumed that it was just me feeling that way. But once I learned that, like, everyone else, all of my peers were also feeling that way, it was really reassuring. And we could actually, like, lean on each other and reassure each other that we all belong. And so I work hard to model that vulnerability at Duolingo as well, and just share, like, hey, I do feel imposter syndrome. And especially as somebody that's in a more senior position, I feel like I have a role to play to kind of model that vulnerability.
The advice you give to everyone else, you kind of have to give it to yourself and be kind to yourself in that sense. But I think it's definitely easier said than done.
And I think some advice that I would give is, I already said, like, I think role models and mentors are important, and you shouldn't be afraid to just ask people, if there's a woman that you see out there in the world that's really, like, you love how she's showing up, just asking her, like, hey, can we grab a coffee, and can we talk about some of the stuff that I'm going through, or can you share your experiences? I think you'll find that most women are willing, very, very willing to do that, because probably they had somebody like that in their life that, and they want to pay it forward.
I think that's such good advice. Like, nothing ventured, nothing gained. It is always worth reaching out. And not to put you on the spot, Erin, but my last question has to be, what is your favorite language to order coffee in after learning so many? And how do I do it?
Oh man, I would probably say, well, there's the cheat way of saying it, which is just like, un café, s'il vous plaît, a coffee, please. Or you could say, je voudrais un café, I would like a coffee.
I will definitely take that with me if I make it abroad this summer. Thank you so much, Erin, for joining me today. It's been really, really amazing to hear about all of the different ways in which AI can kind of be harnessed to create so much impact and so much change across just one app. And it's so exciting to see that it's being kind of launched in lots of other ways as well. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been really, really great to talk with you.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Teens and AI podcast. You can find out more about Duolingo's research at the link in the episode description. To stay updated on the podcast, follow us at Teens and AI Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and do let us know about your experiences with Duolingo, or if you now decide to start learning a language. You can catch new episodes of the podcast every other Thursday. We are also currently looking to expand our Teens and AI podcast team, so if you think you would like to get involved with audio editing, presenting, or marketing, head to our social media to find out more. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a great week.